Did you know Malcolm X's father might have been murdered by white supremacists, not just struck by a streetcar? This early violence set the tone for all he became. These are the reasons why no one will ever match Malcolm X. Malcolm's story didn't start with hope or opportunity. No, it was far more horrific than what any child should bear. It began with fire, threats, death, and the sound of shattered glass. His parents, Louise and Earl Little, were followers of Marcus Garvey, a man who preached black pride and independence at a time when that idea could get you killed. Their family home in Omaha, Nebraska, was attacked by armed Klansmen before Malcolm was even born. Later, in Lansing, Michigan, another home of theirs burned to the ground, and most believed white supremacists were behind it. When Malcolm was 6, his father left home one evening and never returned alive. The police said he was struck by a streetcar, but locals whispered a darker truth, that he had been beaten and left on the tracks by the Black Legion, a hate group tied to the Klan. Imagine growing up with that kind of trauma, knowing your father might have been murdered for believing black people deserved dignity. His mother had a nervous breakdown not long after, and the family was torn apart by welfare agencies. That kind of pain does something to a child. It doesn't just hurt, it reshapes how you see the world. For Malcolm, it built a distrust of authority, a deep rage at injustice, and a refusal to ever be silent again, even if his voice got him killed. His childhood wasn't just tragic, it was the foundation of his fire. Every speech, every confrontation, and every word he spoke later came from that same wound that never truly healed. When Malcolm entered prison in 1946, he was a broken man. He had been hustling in Boston and New York, robbing, dealing, and surviving by any means. Society had written him off as another statistic, but prison turned out to be the place where he rebuilt himself completely. Inside those gray walls, he started reading, first out of boredom, then out of hunger. He read philosophy, history, religion, and politics. He even copied entire dictionaries just to learn new words. He once said that prison was his university, and that's exactly what it became. He studied the horrors of slavery, the lies of colonialism, and the power of self-knowledge. And for the first time, he saw how history had been used to strip black people of pride and identity. That realization sparked a revolution in his mind. He joined the Nation of Islam and began writing to Elijah Muhammad, who taught that self-discipline and knowledge were keys to liberation. By the time he walked out in 1952, he wasn't the same man. He had turned his anger into purpose. That's the real power of Malcolm's story, as it shows that transformation is possible even in the darkest places. Most leaders start with privilege, but Malcolm's strength came from pain, isolation, and study. He didn't inherit leadership. He earned it one book, one thought, and one revelation at a time. That's why his voice still hits harder than most today, because it came from a place of raw truth. When Malcolm was released, he stepped into a country boiling with racial tension. The civil rights movement was still young, but the Nation of Islam was small and almost unknown. But that changed the moment Malcolm joined. He had a rare gift, which was the ability to speak directly to the anger and pride that many black Americans had been forced to bury. He dropped his last name, Little, calling it a slave name, and replaced it with X to symbolize what his ancestors had lost. He traveled constantly, building mosques in Boston, Philadelphia, and Harlem, something black revolutionaries rarely did. His speeches were not just magnetic, they were scathing truths. He didn't sugarcoat racism or beg for acceptance. He told people they were already powerful, that they didn't need white approval to define their worth. That message hit like a thunderclap. Within a few years, the Nation of Islam exploded in size, growing from a few hundred followers to tens of thousands, and Malcolm's charisma made him the movement's face and its heart. He also launched Muhammad Speaks, the nation's newspaper, spreading its message nationwide. Universities invited him to speak, and even people who disagreed couldn't ignore him. Journalists wrote about him, cameras followed him, and before long, he became the most feared and respected black voice in America. But what made Malcolm truly different was that he didn't chase fame. It was fame that chased him because his truth was undeniable. He built a movement out of raw conviction and discipline, proving that one man with purpose can shake an entire system. That's why no leader since has ever carried that same electricity. Malcolm X wasn't trying to be polite or diplomatic. He believed the time for waiting on white approval was over. While civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. were marching hand in hand with white allies, Malcolm stood on the other side of the street, arms folded, asking one tough question: Why should black people beg for something that already belonged to them? To him, integration sounded like surrender. It sounded like saying, we can't be free unless they let us. He found that insulting. He believed freedom had to come from within, through discipline, education, and control over black communities. Malcolm's anger scared people, even some black leaders. But deep down, he wasn't promoting hate. He was promoting self-respect. When he said, by any means necessary, he wasn't pushing for chaos. He was pushing for power, and for the right to defend oneself in a country that had never defended black lives. His secret meeting with members of the Ku Klux Klan in 1961 shocked everyone. But he wasn't seeking their friendship. He wanted to understand their moves and their motives. That's how serious he was about knowing his enemy. Then, after his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1964, his worldview cracked wide open. He saw Muslims of every color praying together. It humbled him, as he realized the real fight wasn't against white people, but against injustice itself. Yet he never softened his demand for full equality. He didn't want symbolism. He wanted transformation, and that made him untouchable. Malcolm X once called Elijah Muhammad his father figure. He was the man who gave him direction when he had none. For years, Malcolm defended him with passion, building the Nation of Islam from a small group into a national movement. But everything changed when Malcolm found out about Elijah's secret affairs with his own followers. For someone who preached moral purity, that betrayal cut deep. Malcolm was furious, not just because of the hypocrisy, but because he realized the man he worshipped wasn't what he seemed. While most loyalists would keep shut, Malcolm spoke out. Then came his comment about John F. Kennedy's assassination being chickens coming home to roost. That one sentence ended his career with the Nation of Islam. Elijah suspended him, and that break would never heal. In 1964, Malcolm officially left the nation and converted to traditional Islam. He founded the Muslim Mosque Incorporated and the Organization of Afro-American Unity. But these weren't just new groups. They were his rebirth. But walking away came with a price. The Nation of Islam saw him as a traitor. Then, threats followed him everywhere. On February 14th, 1965, his home in Queens was firebombed with his wife and children inside. A week later, on February 21st, at just 39 years old, he was gunned down while giving a speech at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem. His assassination wasn't just a murder. It was a silencing of one of the most fearless voices America had ever produced. He died for telling the truth, even when that truth cut too deep for others to bear. How would you feel knowing your enemies were watching your every move? Well, Malcolm X lived like that every day, as the FBI had their eyes on him long before he was famous. In 1950, when he was still in prison, he wrote to President Truman, saying he opposed the Korean War and leaned toward communist ideas. That letter alone was enough to get him listed as a potential threat. From then on, the Bureau tracked his every move. J. Edgar Hoover personally ordered agents to do something about Malcolm X. That meant wiretaps, informants, undercover agents sitting in his meetings, and the possibility of a mysterious death, just like his father. They searched for crimes that didn't exist. They even investigated whether he broke a law that almost no one had heard of. But Malcolm lived clean. He didn't smoke, he didn't drink. He was never late. Even some informants described him as a man of high moral character. And that frustrated the FBI even more, because you can't destroy a man whose only weapon is truth. What's worse is that some historians believe the FBI knew about the plot to kill him and did nothing. Imagine that. The government, sworn to protect citizens, possibly standing by while a revolutionary was gunned down. Malcolm wasn't dangerous because he carried guns. He was dangerous because he carried ideas. He made people question power, religion, and history itself. That's why they feared him. He was everything they couldn't control. He was a man who refused to be silent. Now, if you love this story, subscribe to my channel to watch the next video. It'll blow your mind.